Hi, I'm Heather from GG Stitching and welcome to my channel. Today we're going to talk about fabric and what you need to know when you go shopping in order to pick out the right thing for your quilting project. We're going to talk about scale, print, focus fabric, and value and how those can help guide your choices. For most quilts, we're looking for 100% cotton. And when I say most quilts, that's just because there are other quilts that we do. For example, like t-shirt quilts or memory quilts with, clothes in them or ties. And so not every quilt is going to have 100% cotton, but most of them do, and it is the easiest to work with. When you go shopping and you go into the store, you can normally find, a bolt of fabric, and we're going to find the information on what it is made out of on the end of the bolt. And if you have not gone shopping for fabric before, like you said, we're going to do this channel based on beginners, and maybe you haven't gone in and done this before. But a bolt is how it comes from the mill. So they will process it, and then they will roll it on this cardboard core, and then it is sent to the stores. When you look at the label, there will be other information on it. So like this one says 100% cotton on it. And then it'll also tell you the width. Most of them are 44, 45. That means that when this is stretched out, because it is on a fold, there's 44 to 45 inches. Now, that's not completely usable fabric, and we'll talk about that in a minute. There is wide backs, so there's backing and other fabrics that might be up to 108 inches wide, and so they will be on longer bolts. You'll be able to see that information on here to know what you're getting, and a lot of times they'll even have on here how you should wash it, so you want to pay attention to that. But you want to make sure that you are looking for 100% cotton. You don't want any blends for right now. The blends will have too much stretch to them, and that will make a difference in how your blocks turn out. And so to be able to control that for the beginning, I would stick with 100% cotton. When it comes off of the bolt, sorry, pause there. When you're looking at this and it comes off the bolt, you're going to see there's a fold. So there's a fold there. And then you have these two edges. Now, on this fabric, you can't see it as well, but on other fabrics, you see this white here. So those are your salvage edges. All fabric has that. So basically, a salvage edge is a tightly woven area that runs along each piece of the fabric end that keeps it from unraveling. So you'll see that they're really dense. It's hanging on there so that way, it doesn't fall apart. So that is your salvage edge. Those will get cut off later, but for right now, we'll be leaving those, but you need to know what those are. The anatomy, basically, of fabric when we're dealing with fabric that's on the bolt, we also deal with grain. So there's 3 different types of grain. So there's straight or lengthwise grain, cross grain, and a bias grain. So the straight of grain runs parallel to the salvage edges. So that means that your straight of grain is going to be going across this way of your fabric. That is your strongest grain. That is the one that has your least amount of stretch. And so that makes it easier to control. Your cross grain is the one that is running between the width of it. So from salvage edge to salvage edge is what that grain is. And with that, there is some stretch, and it's usually just one direction. So that's how you can kind of tell if your salvages are missing, and so you don't know which is which. Your cross grain has a little more give to it, a one-way stretch, than your straight of grain. And then your bias grain, that's your one that has all the stretch in it. So that is a 45-degree angle from that salvage edge. That is good for curves, makes it lay nice and straight, and bias binding at the end. So that's important to know those kind of things for the anatomy of your fabric. When you go and you have this cut, they are cutting the width of the fabric. So you're going to see WOF in a lot of patterns. That stands for width of fabric. So when you go and they're going to cut, some places may do 1/8 of a yard, but it's, you know, an eighth of a yard is 4.5 inches times the length of fabric, so that with the fabric, and so that's 44.45. Not a whole lot is done with an eighth. Now, if you're getting, you know, a yard and an eighth, then that's a little different. Quarter of a yard is 9 inches for the width of fabric. Half a yard, 18. 3/4, 27, and then 36 is a yard of fabric. So 36 inches by the 44.45 width of fabric. So that way you know what those standard cuts are. There are specialty cuts, and those are fun cuts, and that can also help build your stash, or, you know, things that you might play with. So you have your different pre-cuts that are kind of fun. So you can get them in pre-cut bundles. Usually these are coming from the fabric companies. They have released a line of fabric, and you get one piece of each fabric that's in that line, so you get more variety. You have to pay attention to your patterns to make sure that it's within a usable width or size that you can use in those quilts. But there are a lot of patterns that are designed specifically to use with pre-cuts. And so when I say pre-cuts, there are things like a fat eighth. So a fat eighth, instead of being an eighth of a yard, which is 4.5 inches by the width of fabric, a fat eighth would be 9 inches by 22 piece of fabric. So it's still technically an eighth of a yard. What fabric shops do is they have a yard of fabric, and they have a special way of cutting it that you get those usable pieces so that you can use something a little wider. A fat quarter, you'll see a lot of those in places. A fat quarter is a 9 by 22 inch piece. Same thing, instead of getting a quarter of a yard that is 9 by the width of fabric, sorry, a fat quarter is 18 by 22, you get a more usable piece with that 18 by 22 inches. There are jelly rolls, and I don't mean the singer. I mean, he's good too, and he actually knows what jelly rolls are. And I don't mean the pastry. So jelly rolls are 2.5 inch wide strips cut the width of the fabric, and then they are wrapped in a bundle, and I have one around here somewhere. Oh, yep, here we go. Have one right here. So this is a jelly roll, and it had, you know, a piece of fabric from the whole line. Usually comes like that. And then there are charm packs. Charm packs are usually 5 inch squares. Same thing though, it's a piece of fabric from the whole line, depending on how many they have. They can come with 5 inch squares, or the mini charms, which I think are 2.5 inch squares. I don't really use those that much, so that's not on my brain there. And then there's layer cakes. Boy, they make everything sound yummy, don't they? So layer cakes are 10 inch squares. So you can definitely get more usable sized blocks out of layer cakes. And it's a good way to get a different type of fabric that without as much yardage. Now, if you like a lot of the prints in the line, that's a great way to go. If you're not really a fan of all of the prints that are in the line, you may not use all of them. But it is a good way to get things that are interesting for your stash if you don't already have one. And so when I say stash, there are a lot of people that collect fabric, or they get yardage and they get a little extra just in case they cut wrong. And so they have leftover fabric afterwards. And there's all kinds of patterns for stash scrappy quilts that you can use that stash up, or kind of like me, you end up with all these totes with the stash underneath here, but we're going to work on using that up in future videos as well. Let's see what else. So those are all good ones right there. We'll talk about scale, print, warm and cool colors, value, focus fabric. When you go in and you start picking out what you might want, a focus fabric is one of the ways to start off. Find a fabric that is just wow to you, that really grabs your attention, and that's going to be the focus on what you build your quilt out of. This could be something that's in a big print, or a vibrant color, or it could be a character. It could be anything like that. And that is a good way to focus on what you want your quilt colors to be. You want to be careful of whatever focus fabric you pick, that you know what block size they're going to end up in. So for example, the baby quilt that we're going to be putting up instructions for here soon, those squares are cut to 4.5 inches. if there was a large print face of an animal or a character or something, I might end up cutting into that face and you never actually get a full size character in that square. Now, if I was doing something with 6-inch blocks or 10-inch blocks, and then you would really see it, that would be perfect. So you want to make sure that the scale, which is something we're going to talk about here, fits into what you're using for that fabric. So what scale means is that's usually in a small, medium, or large. And that's just talking about the print or the design that's on that fabric. The smaller the scale, the smaller the blocks, it will fit in those smaller blocks better. So if you have a small scale print and you're using 2.5-inch blocks, that means you'll probably actually see that print and you won't lose any of it. And that will work really well. A large print doesn't necessarily, or large scale print doesn't necessarily work in those smaller blocks. Now, you may not care. You just may want to use it, and those different colors add interest to it, and that is perfectly fine. So we're going to show you some different scale here. So in this one, this has a bit of a smaller scale. It's got little tiny flowers in here and they're closer together. And so this would be considered a small scale. This one I would consider more of my medium scale. It's a little more spread out. The little leaves are a little bigger. Now, granted, both of these are small enough they would work and there's not a high contrast. Now, something like this, once again, this isn't necessarily large scale, but you see that the prints are a little further apart. And so you may not get as many of the bigger roses in the smaller squares. So those really kind of let you know. This, there you go. So this one has, roses on it. They're a little more spread out. So this may not work as well in smaller squares if you want that rose to really show. Let's see, what else do we have here? Oh, let's pull up that baby quilt that we were going to be doing. So in the baby quilt, we have different scales in here. Mostly everything in this was small scale, so this had a really small print to it, so this is my small scale. And then we have the polka dots, which are a medium compared to this. And I really don't have anything large scale in this until we get to the outside border. And the outside border has a little more of a larger print to it. It has the little animals, but you can see that they would be cut up. And if they were in a smaller, like a 2.5-inch, you would lose all that. You wouldn't know that this was a really pretty underwater scene. So you would want to watch for that. Prints, basically print is just the pattern that's on the fabric. You can have tone on tone. So that's kind of like for white example, there's white fabric and then it has a white print on it that you really aren't going to see it too well until you get up close to it. And so you probably can't even see that. This purple has a little bit of that. It's a purple on purple. So those are more of a tone on tone type of thing. And then let's talk about warm and cool colors. So we have warm colors, cool colors. Your warm colors would be your reds, your yellows, your orange. Your cool colors would be more of your blues, your purples, your greens. And it's important to know those just when you're picking things out. When you're dealing with complementary colors, usually, so if you've ever used a color wheel or had an art class, those are really helpful in knowing which ones are contrast, complementary, and how they work together. Usually with complementary colors, you're using one warm to the opposite cool. So like red and green, blue, orange, kind of like a lot of blue and orange back here. Yellow and purple, they bring out the best in each other. The way that they complement and make each other more vibrant just makes it stand out better in your quilt. Your contrast, think of something highly different from each other. So that doesn't just have to be color, but for example, white and black, right? White and black, completely contrasting, and they're going to stand out from each other. Value can do that as well, though. So light or dark in the same color. So you could have a dark purple and a light purple or a lilac. So those would contrast from each other. You could do that even with print versus the large print and the small print. That scale makes a difference in how things stand out to each other as well. I was trying to see if I had anything like that stood out here. scale-wise. Probably not in this quilt. I'll see what else I've got somewhere else. But the scale is going to make them stand out from each other. So when I say that, now granted, okay, yellow and green, these are different colors, but the flowers are different scales, and so they read a bit differently. They have all these little ones and they end up looking like little dots, whereas this definitely shows up bigger. So those also have a contrast to them. So they can be multiple things. Let's see, what else do we have? I think that is everything that I wanted to talk about for fabric, for going shopping and picking it out. I will do another video about preparing the fabric. So we'll talk about the pre-wash or not pre-wash. That is the question. We'll talk about that in another video, and we'll talk about preparing your fabrics. I wanted you to have this one so that you had ideas in mind for going shopping. I will also put up a file in the description section. I'll put a link and a file up. I'm going to put up kind of like a dictionary of sorts. So every time we talk about different quilting terms, I will put those in the video description so that you have them for reference, so that you can go back and look at that. I will also upload another video with the fabric requirements to the baby quilt that we're going to be doing as a project, so that way you will have the fabric requirements for either doing a baby quilt size or a lap quilt size, depending on what you want to do, and then that way you can start shopping. If you found this helpful, if this information was new to you and you liked it, please like and let me know that this is the content you want to see. Comment, let me know, if you liked it, or if there's something I didn't answer for you in this first part to get you ready to go shopping, and I will definitely answer and help you out with that. And then subscribe so that way you can keep up to date on all the new videos that get posted. I'm going to try to post fairly quickly with all of the new basic things to get you ready to go before I start posting videos of actual step-by-step to make the quilt project. So the next things, like I said, we'll talk about is fabric preparation. We're going to also talk about the basic tools. So we're going to have videos about your sewing machine, your rotary cutters, your mats, what to look for with that. We'll talk about needles. What's the right needles for your sewing machine? Do you have to have a sewing machine to quilt? Nope, you sure don't. You could hand piece if you wanted to. That could be a whole nother thing. If you're interested in hand piecing, let me know. I could do a tutorial earlier than I was going to on hand piecing if you don't have a sewing machine, but you would like to quilt. You are not left out of this if you still want to make a quilt and don't have a sewing machine. So we're going to talk about that as well. Your basic tools, pens, scissors, all of those things. There's going to be upcoming videos so that you will have all of that basic knowledge and understanding before we get to the first quilt project. So again, I'm Heather, GG Stitching. I hope you found this information helpful and have a little more confidence when you go out shopping. Thank you. Have a great day.